That's what's going on with COVID nonsense. Let's turn our attention to something even more dystopian than that, or maybe not more dystopian, but just as dystopian. Let's talk about critical race theory, shall we? Because Chris Rufo is on the case again. If you guys are not following Chris Rufo, you need to follow Chris Rufo. I don't know why you wouldn't be already. I report on Chris Rufo's stories all the time, because he is the best. He is working on a series right now exposing 10 Fortune 100 companies with what they're doing in regards to critical race theory training. Scoop. Bank of America Corporation teaches employees that the United States is a system of white supremacy, promotes the abolishment of the police, and instructs workers to decolonize their minds and become woke at work. The whistleblower documents will shock you. So we're going to take a look at some of these whistleblower documents. I just want to point out that Chris also has a nice write-up about this in City Journal. Now, the reason I like to look at the documents instead of just looking at his write-up is I just like to be able to see. I think it's more impactful that we just look at the documents he has in this Twitter thread. But definitely check out his work with City Journal. He also posts a lot, or writes a lot, for the New York Post, so that's really good too. Earlier this year, Bank of America and the United Way implemented a race re-education program called United in Action, encouraging employees to participate in a racial equity 21-day challenge built on the principles of critical race theory and intersectionality. I've seen this challenge all over the place. I've seen it all over the place. I've taken it. I signed up for it through several colleges that were offering it publicly, including Boston University, my alma mater, the home of Ibram X. Kendi. They will never get another dime from me as long as they're promoting this stuff. But I've seen this 21-day racial equity challenge all over the place. On day one, Bank of America teaches employees that the United States is a racialized society that uses race to establish and justify systems of power, privilege, disenfranchisement, and oppression, which gives privileges to white people. Fill in the blank, folks. Critical race theory is not about race. It is about blank. Critical race theory is not about race. It is about blank. Race and racial identity. Although race has no genetic or scientific basis other than melanin, the concept of race is important and consequential. Societies use race to establish and justify systems of power, disenfranchisement, and oppression. Yup, Adrian in first. Critical race theory is not about race. It is about power. That's why they talk about power all the time. The notion of race is a social construct designed to divide people into groups ranked as inferior and superior. The scientific consensus, with, of course, no source documented, is that race, in this sense, has no biological basis. We are all one race, the human race. Racial identity, however, is very real. How can you, in the same paragraph, say that we're all one race, the human race? However, racial identity is real. Like, those two things are completely contradictory. And in a racialized society like the United States, everyone is assigned a racial identity, whether they are aware of it or not. According to the training, all whites, regardless of one's socioeconomic, class, background, or other disadvantages, are living a life with white skin privilege. Even white toddlers are guilty and must be taught to recognize and reject the smog of white privilege. Toddlers. Remember, the Arizona Department of Education teaches people that we start to become racist at 3 years old. 3. As I explain in my book, according to our hearts, whites in interracial black-white marriages or relationships frequently experience a shift in how they personally understand their individual racial identity. And in a society where being white, regardless of one's socioeconomic class, background, or other disadvantages, means living life with white skin privileges, such as being presumed safe, competent, and non-criminal. Whites who begin to experience discrimination because of their intimate connection with someone of another race, or who regularly see their loved ones fall prey to racial discrimination, may no longer feel white. After all, their lived reality does not align with the social meaning of being White. I would like to know, are there anyone with is there anyone in an interracial marriage in the chat? You know who is in an interracial marriage? Chris Rufo. Chris Rufo's wife is Asian. P.S. So maybe Chris Rufo doesn't feel white anymore. I'm not sure. Yay! Adam mounted the like button. Yay, yay, yay. Thank you, Adam. About culture and identity with their very young children. But talk about, I wish he'd provided the whole thing. I want to go back and find this document. But talk about racial inequity and preparation for discrimination were more likely to occur as children grew older. Van Ostale and Freegan argue that all children should be actively taught to recognize and reject the smog of white privilege, but that if anti bias education exists in school curriculum at all, it tends to be too little, too late. No, dude, like your wife is super white. She's very white. You're still white, Adam. I'm sorry. You're still white. You may have cut off all your hair, but you're still very white. You can't get over it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not covering this story about Australia. I thought about it. I put it on the list, but I don't think I'd be able to read that story without crying. It's awful. If you guys don't know what's happening, like Australia is literally putting down rescue dogs because they don't want volunteers to go in and take care of it. It's so sad. So no, we will not be covering that story. I'm sorry. All right, let's keep going. Over the next 3 days, Bank of America teaches that whites are more likely to have more limited imagination. I don't know how they're measuring that exactly. Experiencing fear, anxiety, guilt, or shame, and contribute to racial tension, hatred, and violence. People of color, on the other hand, cannot be racist. As people of a dominant culture, white people may be more likely to be unreflective and unquestioning about our cultural values and assumptions, have a diminished capacity to persevere in the face of obstacles or discomfort, experience fear, anxiety, guilt, or shame around issues of race, and react in broken ways as a result. Feel barriers to authentic and intimate relationships with people of color, as well as with white people who have different opinions on race. Well, isn't it ironic that they say that we can't have authentic relationships with white people that have different opinions? Because it seems more to me that those white people usually tend to be bougie, rich women who are also pasty white. They don't really seem to want to have relationships with us, do they? Hold an incomplete what? Hold White people are more likely to hold an incomplete view of God, as our theology and faith traditions are shaped mostly or exclusively by a Euro American perspective. Okay. My spiritual beliefs are actually heavily influenced by what was going on 3,000 years ago in Egypt, but I guess that doesn't count. Ashley Clare says, just hit that like button. Australia sucks now. Dude, what's going on in Australia makes me so sad. It makes me so sad. I'm never going to get to visit Australia. B, it's just like, it's hard to watch what they're doing. It's really bad. Adrian W. So how does this relate to the Italian X thing now? Guys, if you didn't see my video yesterday, congratulations, Italians. You're oppressed again. Thank you to Andrew Cuomo. You are considered oppressed. They're calling you Italian X, and we're not allowed to call you pasta people anymore, apparently. I don't know who was calling Italians pasta people in the first place, but now we really know that we've crossed the line. So you can check out my video yesterday for more information about that. But who knows? Oh, also Italians are now considered white people of color. All right, let's see. Contribute to racial tension, hatred, and violence in our homes, communities, and the world. White people have more limited imagination and creativity due to complacency in the status quo. Wow. And you'll notice there are no citations here for any of this. White people have more limited exposure to enriching cultures, perspective, and assets of people of color. And white people struggle to work across racial lines in addressing shared concerns and contributing to an improved society. Wow. Let's see. Spend time thinking about how you might respond to these challenges that may arise during your discussion. What about reverse discrimination? What about white people who work real hard? Now they can't get jobs. That's not fair. Why should whites be punished? Consider. Reverse racism and discrimination are not possible given the history of oppression and power structures that have been core to the making of this country. All white people, all people, excuse me, guys, sorry, all people can be unfair and treat others badly. But that is not the same thing as being racist. Racism is, by definition, a form of oppression based on socially constructed concept of race used by the dominant racial culture, whites, over non-dominant racial groups. Bank of America. Bank of America, ladies and gentlemen. Next, Bank of America instructs white employees to deconstruct their racial and sexual identities and confront their white privilege and white fragility in order to discover where they are on the privilege spectrum and if they exhibit white fragility traits. Look at this. Oh my God, they have to fill out a form. We should all fill out this form, I think. I think we should. Okay, let me see how much privilege I have. Look over this list below, beginning on the left side. Check all the ways in which you do not have identity privilege. You can include everything from being left-handed to practicing a faith that worships on Saturday. I practice a faith that takes hallucinogenics. Is that going to be on the list? Am I oppressed? Probably. I do not have privilege in the following identity areas. Socioeconomic. Yeah, I probably have privilege there. Sexual orientation. Yep, definitely got privilege. Religion. No. Gender. No. Gender identity. I mean, who's to say, really? I might feel like a different gender tomorrow, so really I have a hard time checking that off. Employment. What does it mean to have employment privilege? Because I work for myself. Which means I actually have to work to make money. I can't just go in and laze around at a job in an office like I used to do when I worked for other people. So I'm going to say no, I do not have employment privilege. If I don't get up and work and bust my ass and figure out ways to make money, I don't make money. Physical ability. I mean, again, who's to say by what definition? English speaking. Yep. Ethnicity, probably. Geographic location. I mean, I live in New Hampshire. I don't know. I don't know what that means. It probably means I do have privilege. Nationality, probably have privilege. Education, modern utilities, age. By what definition? Like, who has age privilege? What does it even mean to have age privilege? Do the young have age privilege? Do the old have age privilege? Who is defining this? All right. White privilege. I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having my coworkers on the job suspect that I got it because of race. You know what would, okay, I'm sorry. Look at this. I like saying that you can take a job without your employers asking if, or your coworkers asking if you got it because of your race. You know what would prevent that from happening? If you just got rid of affirmative action hires. If you knew that everyone was hired into a job because of their merit and their ability and their competence, that would get rid of that entirely for everyone. I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systemic racism for their own daily physical protection. Okay. I am never asked to speak for all the people in my racial group. Dude, white people are asked to represent all other white people all the effing time. This is a whole book about white people representing all other white people. So no, that is false. I feel welcomed and normal in the usual walks of public life, institutional or societal. Yeah, well, that's a personal choice. I have a low credibility. As a leader, I can be sure that my race is not the if I have low credibility as a leader, I can be sure my race is not the problem. If you have low credibility as a leader and your first thought is that it's because of your race, then that's your first problem. I can worry about racism without being seen as self-interested or self-seeking. Well, no, white people virtue signal all the time. If I have a bad day or year, week or year is going, excuse me, if my day, week or year is going badly, I need not ask of each negative episode or situation whether it has racial undertones. No one has to ask that in real life. Later, Bank of America teaches that the policing system was founded on white supremacist slave patrols and, according to activists, can be solved through the defunding and even the abolishment of the police. So they watch a TED Talk about American policing grew out of efforts to control the labor pool and it's been poor slave and enslaved people in the 19th century and beyond. The origins of policing in America to take over the former duties of the slave patrols or even the abolishment of the police. This, by the way, I'm pretty sure this photo is from over the summer when Black Lives Matter literally sieged the White House and set fire to a guard shack, and no one did anything about it except make fun of Trump for going down to the bunker. In the final days, Bank of America tells employees to decolonize their minds and become woke at work. Participants must admit that their words and actions are inherently shaped and influenced by systemic oppression and must cede power to people of color. Decolonize your mind. Accept that white supremacy and institutional racism are real and practiced by all races. Just accept white people that you're a racist. We haven't provided you any evidence of that. You don't even need to behave a certain way in order to be racist. Just accept it. We don't need evidence. We have the lived experiences of the people who made up this course. Interrogate the dominant narrative, understand implicit bias and your identity and role in enabling and propagating structural racism. Complete your internal work. Don't put the burden exclusively on people of color or people who you perceive to be more woke to explain the system to you. Hold yourself accountable for the work at all four levels at which racism operates. And then for the structural, be accountable at the individual and organizational level for dismantling personal, interpersonal, institutional, and structural instruments of white supremacy. So the second bullet point is they want people to become an activist. Publicly advocate for race equity, which equity is equal outcomes, essentially. It's Marxism. Publicly advocate for race equity and challenge white dominant cultural norms, including naming microaggressions in interpersonal and institutional contexts, and cede power to people of color within and across teams and organizations and systems. Just give it up. Give it up. Because again, critical race theory is not about race, it's about power. And then he's got the full story there and all the source documents. Thank you, Chris Rufo, for being a tireless warrior in this arena.